Hello, everybody. Welcome to our baseline show. It is July 13th, believe it or not. Time is flying, and we have our gang here, as always, to just chat and do some open office hours. Um, we have Yoav, Keith, Andreas, Samrock, Mark Haddle, Mark Rimza, Jamil, and Otto. And one of the questions we were pondering before we started the stream that we saved is, what is everything Andreas works on that he can share with us? So, Andreas, please.
I want to know the things you can't share. Let's start
that
there.
he can share. Yeah, that was a good
That I
caveat.
can share.
Yes.
So that's the majority. But what I can share is if people are interested in layer 2 projects and layer 2 solutions and their interoperability and standards around that, because that's important, please join the EA community projects layer 2 working group. I put it's in the it's in the chat. If you want to, you can put it. We can put it on the ticker, the GitHub on the ticker hashtag join L2 working group. That's one thing that's exciting. So if you want to hang out with Arbitrum and Optimism and Matter Labs and so forth, please join. Polygon's also there. So that's one. If you're interested in federated certificate authorities and data availability solutions for L2, then check out the Integrated Trust Network. That is a cooperative formed by currently 3 standards organizations. MOBI, the Mobility Open Blockchain Initiative, the Metro Ethernet Forum, MEF, which is a telco, the American Association of Insurers, and the EA is pondering joining and running a node on the Integrated Trust Network, which is a DLT agnostic CA. So DITs are anchored on multiple blockchains, both private and public. That's what I'm working on. Of course, hashtag shilling treetrunk.io, the unmarketplace for NFTs. And if you want to do royalties on chain, check out hashtag EIP 4910. 4910. Then what else? With Mobi, I'm also working on various things around mobility. For example, being able to predict utilizations of networks based on people's trips, anticipated trips that they can share anonymously in a privacy-preserving manner, and also book trips across multi-modes of transportation. Dealer floor plan tracking, which is a big financial services use case around OEMs, electric vehicle battery supply chain, electric vehicle charging. Those are the and then again standards there around vehicle identity, battery identity, trusted trip. So Mobi is a standards organization. And MEF, I've written a couple standards there as well around blockchain in telco, and so they're all coming together nicely in this effort. And then obviously my beloved baseline community, and a few things here and there that I left out.
So like CIA, NSA, are those left out things? Just blink twice.
I can neither deny nor confirm.
Lambda has no need for blinking, so
Yeah, I don't think he's blinked that whole time. But that's cool. It seems like everything's related in a way. So many cool projects you're working on. Any questions for Andreas on all of those things?
Yeah, what's the grand plan? How's it all coming together? What's the singularity you're after?
To undo the folly that are blockchains that have all the different layers combined into one stack. So consensus, execution, data availability, and history into one chain was the original sin of blockchains, and that will take years to undo, to come back to a loosely coupled pattern. And the reason why that is a folly is because you're throwing each layer needs different security assumptions, and you're throwing them all in the bucket of the one layer that has the highest security assumptions, and that's a problem. That's why you cannot have a world computer that makes absolutely no sense, because if you have strong trust assumptions for your execution and storage and something like that, then you will always be slow. You must be slow.
Yeah, tight coupling seems like a problem we're just like doomed to repeat in new text. Why is that, Lambda? Why do we repeat all of our mistakes? Our tight
Because the
coupling
people
mistakes?
who are doing the innovation are really they're typically in their 20s and 30s, and lack the wisdom of old people, and because world history is a repetition of the same pattern. So human beings are doomed to repeat patterns.
Now we're talking Ray Dalio here.
Hmm?
Now we're talking Ray Dalio here.
Well, I mean, it's true, right? I mean, if you look at it, or just look at your personal lives, how hard is it to break bad habits or habits, period, right?
What to know? I don't have any bad habits.
You just start another bad habit. That's how you break one.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's hard. So I think that's what we're repeating. That's where we're repeating things, and we typically don't look at the lessons, because we think, oh, this is a really cool idea and this is really awesome, let's do it. And yeah.
So our leader likes to say that, Paul Brody likes to say that there's no compression algorithm for experience, which I fully agree with. Like there's, we're young guys and whatnot, like we'll make mistakes. I read somewhere on Twitter that there's kind of a costification of Ethereum. I don't know, what are your thoughts are around that? Like, do you think that's like an actual thing with all these L2s and maybe even L3s popping up?
I'm sorry, I lost you there for a second. A cost what?
Cosmofication, like, it's like becoming a little bit like Cosmos in a way, like the Ethereum, platform. Like it's starting to imitate what Cosmos is doing in a way, because we got all these L2s out there and L3s and whatnot.
Yeah, so all the LT2s, it's basically your sharding, right? It's you have your sharding, and it's quasi just a settlement layer. And that's what its primary purpose is, right? It's like you don't really need all that much of execution functionality. You just need simple settlement functionality. So it's overbuilt for its primary purpose, or what it's majorly good for, which is a signaling mechanism of final states, which can be used for, as Baseline does, as an anonymous or privacy preserving bulletin board, or it's like for asset settlement, right? So it's yeah, and you also allows you much more flexibility that way. Right? We don't have one app that rules them all.
Right.
Oh, okay, maybe TikTok. But besides that,
Do you have a TikTok account? Can we put that up on the ticker?
Does
so
Lambda have
everybody
a
can
TikTok?
follow you?
no. I have not one. I have many. I'm in all.
Lambda is TikTok. Whenever they talk about the algorithm,
Exactly.
just not
Lambda
gonna
is
hit.
TikTok. It's hashtag I am Lambda. Yeah, so I think it's becoming clearer that there's and that makes sense, right? You have the internet as the for your data transmission. There's a global settlement layer that is slow but highly secure and publicly available as a public good. So I think that is highly desirable. So it also allows for a lot of more design flexibility and design choices and ability to build for use cases.
Right. And then the interlayer blockchain communication becomes like the big thing. How do we do that securely, right? Avoiding all these hacks that the people do on bridges and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're doing bridges, that's a folly in and of itself, because you're only as strong as the weakest link in the chain of bridges, right? But the key thing is that you're good as long as you have an L2 that's on the same L1. You have multiple L2s, and then you need to do interoperability, right? So it's basically coming up with the equivalent of a TCP/IP for assets. It's a little bit more complicated, but entirely doable. But it will take a little while, right? TCP/IP also didn't appear overnight.
Yeah, there were several competing protocols. I do agree with that. Yeah.
Right. So there were some until, I mean, the reason why we have the internet the way we have it is because Microsoft was basically omnipotent at one point. And that's why it could force everybody to adopt TCP/IP, because it rolled it out with Windows 95. So then every IT department was going like, holy shit, I need to support that, because everybody was using Windows. I mean, basically.
Do you ever use Gopher? Do you remember that protocol?
I'm sorry, which one?
Gopher? Did you ever use that protocol? It's like a search type thing, I think. Gopher?
No.
It was kind of cool. But yeah, I mean, it's just interesting, to your larger point, and there's just various competing protocols, and eventually one becomes dominant. It's not always the best one necessarily, but you can always steal ideas from other platforms, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the best. It doesn't necessarily have to be the best one, right? As long as people agree on it and it works, it's fine, right? So it's like, have to be pragmatic, I would say, in order to move the ball forward, right? And then you can finally do like cool things. So what would be really cool is to have interoperability between video games, between the assets and the video games. That would be really cool, right? You can port characters over, your World of Warcraft character in GTA and
Yeah, that'd be really cool.
That would be awesome. So what MMOs are you playing, Andreas?
Lambda.
Lambda, sorry.
None.
None
All and
at
none.
all?
None and all and none.
He's
Right,
doing
Imagine.
Sim- he's doing Sim City because he's got a quirky new idea for a metaverse.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Hashtag I am metaverse.
I just wonder if anybody at least has
The
thought.
Lambda verse.
I just think when you've got a lot of this multi-party, provider type environment and everything, if anybody has really paid close attention and started to come up with solutions that will optimize, a user to consume all of these different products and services, but be able to pay for them in a single transaction. I mean, that's the big thing Moby has been, having to work at, like with smart cities and interconnected cities, is how do you get all of these API connections that we can then, activate and consume and stuff, but the user wants to be able to pay for this in a single transaction. And so whoever's managing that person, that user management and stuff has a huge tall order, because it's like, how do I pay, in a smart city, the parking meter, and then the Uber, and then the car share, and then, whatever. Same within, people that are trying to, do a lot of these, either metaverse or, even, cross gaming type applications and stuff. It's like, how do we get everybody that, make it easy for them so that they can consume and pay for this in a single transaction? That's probably a big nut that needs to be cracked.
Standards. There's no way around that, and so I actually have, there's an interesting problem, which is actually a baseline. It's a great case for baseline. If anybody wants to, that's actually a real problem. So if you're in the telco sector, and this is a multi-billion-dollar problem in the telco sector, is address validation. So how do I know that an address is actually serviceable, right? It's like, can you service one? And do you actually have so it's like, the answer often is no, I don't. That's actually, yes, you do, but you don't have this address this way. You probably have it similar to this.
Mhm.
So the big thing is that telcos don't want to share that information, because then everybody would know who AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile and so forth serves with services. And but it is extremely valuable to know if an address is valid, or if there's a set of addresses that are very similar that all are basically the same thing.
And that this address resides with a million other addresses somewhere, and you've got to pinpoint and find it.
Well, the real question is, and this comes back to the multi-party orchestration and under zero knowledge, is can you be a layer in between that allows you to ask the question to multiple parties at the same time? Hey, this is address A, do you have this address, or something that is very similar to this, right? And then let that come back, and then you have these 10 addresses and that have 5 different origins, or 10 different origins, or 20 different origins, and a certain number of people agree all on that, and then you can utilize that with a certain a very large degree of certainty, without having shared competitive information, because you've dissociated the identity of the origin from the final answer. So it's really an orchestration aggregation question. How can I orchestrate queries to a lot of counterparties and provide the answer to a single query that came in, that I distributed in a privacy preserving manner? That's a big thing, because that also will can disintermediate a lot of service providers, because they are now pulling data together into one data structure, and again, you're creating honeypots and single points of failure and so forth. So this is a multi-billion-dollar question and opportunity if you can get corporations to open up their address systems, then you can have a large scale address validation system under zero knowledge. Just a thought here.
Well, and a lot of that probably will, largely, address a validation problem to where, even if you are, with an employee within whatever sphere, if you're within a telco and you need to validate a certain address, you're going to have people going, why are you asking? And who are you? And do you have a permissive purpose to be asking this? You have a lot of that coming in there, the whole privacy preserving, just in case, because if you have such a large bank of users, you're going to have a large, bunch of employees to manage and at least perform their functions and stuff. How do you make sure that all, none of them have gone rogue?
Well, if you have the privacy, if it's privacy preserving, if you only know that these addresses are similar to, and this has been validated by organizations that have been vetted by that provider, who's just basically a data orchestrator. That's a valuable thing, which comes back to your point of providing multiple services to an end user, right? So it becomes a data supply chain orchestration problem.
So, yeah.
Under zero knowledge, because you don't know all the supply chain steps before it, right? Where this all comes from, right? But you need to be able to, for compliance reasons, you have to make assertions about that.
Well, and then kind of take that a step later. For a real world use case, if you look at ESG reporting, to where it's like, okay, Mars, the candy confection company came out and said, we are going to make a pledge that, we are going to be 100% carbon neutral, or we're going to have, this amount of green footprint. And it's like, well, are you attesting that all of your suppliers, the people that supply the nougat and the nuts and the sugar and all that, are on the same, platform? And are you really attesting that? And how can you validate it if somebody says, you know what, I'm not quite sure that's accurate. Can you prove to me that you are? They at least have that structure, that multi-party privacy preserving structure, that they can do that. Or even if it's, any type of compliance reporting, you basically, can share, you've got control and direction of your own data, but, a lot of that is dependent on data from, external parties that you don't control. But you need to include that in your attestation, or at least your reporting. And, these people don't want to share that with you.
Correct. So it always comes back to a multi-party data orchestration challenge as the base pattern. And it's not like one hop, it's multi-step, right? So if you have mobility, you have for example, usage-based car insurance, you have road usage charges, you have mobile in your car as a data service, you have security as a service, right? That is delivered along with that. There are then riding on top of that, you have entertainment services, Spotify, you have Netflix in your car, so this is, and you don't want to have to manage all of them separately.
Right.
Yeah, this seems to be hovering around like a requirement. I know we were going to talk about requirements later, but I just want to bring this up because it feels like it's right around it. There's like one that talks about entities building like pseudonymous maps in case of there's some kind of like compliance or regulatory thing that you're worried about, like you can't do. I think the example gives like you can't do business of somebody in like an embargoed country or something like that. Like that requirement itself just seems kind of huge. Like how do we expect people to go about doing all that to provide that like cryptographic proof of all these entities in the pseudonymous map are within like okay regulations compliance?
Gotta have a reporting element that then, you're gonna cryptographically secure. So I think whatever you have that originating document, whether it's a bill of lading, whether it's a certificate of origin or something like that, you've got to have something, some artifact that then has to be, cryptographically shared, or cryptographically secured, and then, shared in a privacy preserving way, ideally zero knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, but that's like that is the how, like the implementation, like, but when you're going through like to do an implementation and you're one of the entities that's required to build a pseudonymous map, like that's just it feels like a huge undertaking, you know what I mean?
Huge.
Within this single requirement. So it's like,
Well, and it's not isolated within your process thing. I mean, it requires on all these other people too. It's all interconnected. And so you've got to have at least some, threshold of cooperation that, anybody can tell you, hey, humans are awful. I mean, they're not going to do this. So, because they don't want to, and they don't want to hear anything else. So
I think Otto's trying to leave. Otto, do you have a question before you go, man?
No, just glad to catch up with you guys. I'm glad to see that it's going strong. I was also very curious about that new PRVD or provide
PRVD,
sponsored.
Oasis provide.
Like baseline site project, or I don't know what the
It's an open source implementation of the baseline pattern.
Okay.
Sponsored by
Gotcha.
Provide. You can look at it as an open focus group for the open source version of its product.
But it's more centered around the provide, like messaging with Nats and
Yeah. It's around a specific open source implementation and the further development of that, right?
Okay. So it's just a bit more opinionated on. Sorry, go ahead.
It's opinionated. It's a focus group, right? It's an open source focus group that anybody who is interested in the provide stack can participate in, right? So the baseline community is broader, right? It's like it's not opinionated. It's about the pattern itself. It's about the standard around it, and it's about tooling that helps people, implement that pattern through either simple reference implementations, as the core devs are working on, test harnesses, etc. Everything available as open source that makes it easier, right? And then Provide Oasis is very specific around an opinion on how to do that.
Got it. All right. Well, great to catch up with you guys. Have a good one.
You too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for
Thank you, Otto.
Yeah,
So
you were
you were on that requirement. So
Yeah.
the thing is again, you need think creatively, right? So what are your compliance requirements, right? So do they it can be a simple hash chain that can suffice if you're providing them the accessibility to those documents, right? You can do recursive zero knowledge proofs, which where you specify what the predicate is, right? That is, and you have multiple of those put together, and there are many different ways how to do that, right? It is just you need to think about it. What is in alignment with the use case you have, and ideally, if for the implementers, keep it as simple as possible. right? It's like start simple and then, you know, go more complex over time. Right? That would be my advice.
All right, and I kind of want to hit back on the addresses really quick because I've heard you bring it up a couple times. So like, why the importance on addresses versus I don't know, something just like the like immediate sharing of like sensory data between, I don't know, like all cars on the road. Why addresses versus something else? And also, what's your World of Warcraft handle?
So on the addresses, it's just simply because everybody uses them several times a day, right? Versus sensory data from IoT devices, we're I mean, yes, we are using it because we use this all the time, you know, our what is it, the cell phone,
It's
right?
like your hand.
My hand, exactly. Lambda's hand, the hand of Lambda. The so I think the key here is because it is ubiquitous and it is very human, which means there's a lot of variance there in how this is expressed, right? And translated, right? Even, right? It's like I think it is really important because it is a challenge for every single business in the world.
Hmm.
Because you have to write contracts, addresses have to be in there. There are you know, you write invoices, you need to, you know, provide services to addresses, right? You know, you're sending letters, right? People who are still doing that. You know, it's so it is a real world problem. It's an IRL problem that is a data comparison issue. You know, it's like, is this, you know, I have this address, but I really can't find it, but I have this address, which I know where it is. Could this address be that address that was given to me? Right? That's really the, you know, UPS driver, you know, they would probably love that. It's like, I can't find this one. Oh, actually, there's probably one right around the corner that is very similar to this. So I could actually complete the delivery and not drive around for another 30 minutes, which my manager is going to yell at me and whatever. Right. So there are real world consequences or benefits for having a solution that could be equally or that could be equitably and easily accessible for everyone.
What about the second part to my two-part question?
I'm sorry. What was that again? I forgot.
World of Warcraft handle.
World of Warcraft handle.
Yeah. What should I add?
I can. Do you want me to send you that as a zip or as a JSON file? It's gonna be a few hundred megabytes.
All right, just PM me. I'll find, I guess.
Okay. So, but what is the, so I actually have a question for since we're with the core devs here. So it's like what is sort of like the what have you found to be like the most challenging piece in translating the pattern into code that doesn't suck, or architecture patterns that don't suck?
That's the hardest part right there, is just not sucking at writing code. No, I don't know. I think that just some of the, you know, as you're reading through the standard, you're like trying to imagine how, you know, some of these things will be implemented. And then you do run into a lot of things like that I think it was like R23, the one we were talking about, was on this map, where you're like, wow, this is so implementation specific, yet so possibly like broad in what has to be done by a single entity. Its form is so like amorphous that itself is like the difficult thing, like that. It's just hard to imagine until you get to the exact example where, like, you're used to like reading standards that are more so like, like do this kind of exactly, or has this structure. Instead, this is more like, like it's just saying like, oh, it has to have a structure that allows for this, but what that structure is kind of amorphous and dependent on the situation, right? That's my
Yeah, and it's implementation dependent, right? So it's
Right.
just a reference implementation just needs to have an opinion on what it could be and what is can be reasonably done, right? It doesn't have to be the penultimate thing, right? It's that's with all requirements. It's hard, right? And the standard must be opinionated, but can't be too opinionated.
Yeah, that's definitely a difficult part about it, because as soon as like you're working with companies or whatever, then they're like, well, let's get help on making our implementation, and they want something more opinionated, and you say like, okay, well, yeah, that's great, and there's those implementations out there you can go to that are already opinionated, and yours eventually will be opinionated, but like, from our point of view, we have to make sure, because that it is unopinionated, so that when you have like these two bodies that are just cut off from each other and they both made an implementation, that in the end, without really much contact, they'll be able to be part of that same like BPI or something, right?
Mm-hmm. So it's multi-party coordination under zero knowledge is not easy.
So turn that question back on you. What do you think? What do you think people have been having the most problems with turning something into non-sucky code and impulse?
It's typically preconceived notions of how things should be. They're that having these opinions going in, and therefore these opinions manifest themselves then in code, or as I would like in my ERP implementation days, what I said is like, it's like, when companies try to pave the cow path, right? It's a non-optimized way. You're just, they come in with preconceived notion of how things should be or must be, rather than coming in with the statement, oh, I need to get this done, right? Or in terms of, this is the business outcome that I'm trying to achieve, right? But they typically start with a how, right? It's like was my most favorite thing was when a company built a real-time enterprise service bus for month-end close, because some VP or AVP wanted to have close data available in real time, even though it was actually not required for the desired business outcome, right? But that's like, yes, we have to have it real time. That was like a $3-4 million statement right there, and creating of a really convoluted, sucky infrastructure and architecture.
What was the phrase there? Pave the cow path.
Pave the cow path. Yeah.
I'm learning so much about barn animals. Horses for courses. Was that John's one, right?
Yeah, horses for courses. Yes, I think. Yeah, it's like when I can understand people that are just like are living digital lives. That they're like, what are barn animals?
It feels like a real Lambda comment.
Right.
How does
So,
Lambda
So hashtag I am Lambda. Um, the but I think it's worth thinking about that, right?
Yeah.
When also when you're building the simple reference implementations, always question yourselves. And I'm trying to do that themselves, but then it's hard if you're like Lambda to question yourself. The but is this choice that we're making or I'm making here, is this really the simplest way to do it, right? That will get the desired business outcome, or am I just like doing, imposing my opinion on, am I making it
Oh,
more complex because I'm comfortable with that solution, I've implemented it before, it's
that's
easy
it.
to do,
100%.
right? So that's the cow path, right?
Okay.
Right, that's why JavaScript is so ubiquitous.
It's all coming together now. That's the path the cows take, and there's a whole bunch of like cow shit all over it, right?
I didn't say that. That was your statement. I just want to say
Yeah, I'll take that one.
you'll
That
take
was
that
not
one.
wrong.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to so when you're thinking about baseline implementations, building use cases for that, it's like always hard to not immortalize the cow path in code, in architecture, in a standard, right? If you're looking at like if you're looking at certain standards, my favorite one is the one from the Metro Ethernet forum, for their APIs. It is literally just the digitization of the stuff that they're doing manually, right? And it's like, okay, really? So with some improvements there, but it's the without questioning, okay, how can we structure this such that you know the cow path is more of an option rather than the requirement, right? Is like, right? It's like the requirement is the straight street. If you insist on putting this like this, okay, you can do it, but the base thing is straight.
Yeah. I think we're going to talk about some RFPs now, right?
Yeah, we should segue into
RFPs.
the test harness RFP that you just submitted, Andreas. It's one of the items on the roadmap for this year that are a high priority for the baseline standard and community to further progress. So it'd be cool to talk through this so then we can timestamp it and share this as a resource that gives a little more context to that RFP. But generally, it is for developing a test harness that can be used to prove conformance to the standard. Can you elaborate on what we are asking for here, Andreas?
Sure. So the RFP is asking for a simple test harness, which consists of a few things, but only very few things. Number one, you need to give an input to your function that tests the requirement, right? And then you need to specify an expected output, right? So that's what's called a test fixture, right? So that's the basic structure. There's an input, and for a given input, there's an expected output, right? That your BPI, if it conforms to a requirement, will have, right? Then secondly or thirdly, there needs to be an adapter that any implementation can utilize or can adapt to their external or internal interfaces, right? So if they're external, then they are in the standard, right? At least some of them that are, there's a fixed way of how to do that. There are expectations around what data elements should be there and what format, etc. So that simplifies things, right? So if it's just a text fixture for a test fixture for a function that is accessible or that tests one or more requirements, so you can test several requirements with one test if you wanted to, right? So that is entirely up to the implementer. The implementer of the test harness. Then it is just simply you have the external API, and then you just need to decide what is it? Is it a REST call? Is it a WebSocket, whatever? So that's where then the form of the wrapper comes in. It becomes very, very simple. If it's more of an internal thing, then you need to expose then it becomes a little bit more challenging, but it's also not that terribly hard, because it basically just exposes the input in a form that is consumable by another application.
Andreas, could you talk about what types of organizations or groups would be interested in performing the work for this RFP?
That is a very good question. In fact, we were on a call yesterday with IEEE because they have a standard conformance testing program. And they have worked with organizations, especially universities in the past, that have written test harnesses. So they said they would go, back to the well and see if someone would be interested to that have done that before, to take on that work. Universities are a very good source, because this test harness needs to be open source, and B, it's universities have a pool of cheap labor. So and then can the people who write it can then take it and commercialize it, right? So it's also an opportunity. So universities are probably a very good source for that, because let's face it, the baseline pattern, the standards also, and implementations are very early. There are not that many reference implementations or references of implementations of a BPI that are out there, let alone compliant. So it's early. So there is probably not a commercial organization that is going to put a proposal in. So a path forward. So if anybody knows, also the people who are listening, if you know university programs, professors, or people who might be interested in that, it's like, please organize, reach out. Happy to do it. The RFP is short, relatively short, and fairly open in the way that it was phrased, in order to give as much flexibility as possible.
And Andreas, could you mention what resources exist that could be used by developers who are building the test harness?
Yes. So just give you one example. So if you are looking to fulfill the requirements in Section 3 around identifiers and verifiable credentials, there are existing test harnesses and out there for DIT methods, for example. You just need to show it's one, right? Or it's like, so you can integrate, for example, with Universal Resolver to showcase how to create a BPI account utilizing a DID, and then issuing a VC. Again, there's a standard out there with the there are test harnesses how to issue VCs, how to verify VCs, and verifiable presentation. So there's a lot of code out there that exists already, that will help you find the test fixtures, define the test fixtures and the outputs, as well as help you write like the adapters. Right.
That makes sense.
Right. So that's relatively straightforward.
And then just for the people on the call, I know people are aware that the baseline team is in the process of building a simple reference implementation. Could you illustrate how that connects to this test harness RFP?
Yeah. So the easiest thing would be to say, okay, take an API from the standard, right, and what its function is, and then list out all the requirements that this simple API, or not simple, but this API actually tests, right? And you'll find that a lot of those APIs test a lot of the requirements at the same time, right? So if you return that, then you have checkbox this because boom 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 boom, right? So it's you can knock out a lot of requirements with a simple API call that is compliant to the API standard.
Awesome.
Right, because the return results will have all the stuff in there that is, for example, required by the standard, right? In terms of what a BPI subject account comprises of, and the subjects, what it should be, and if you have a DID, then oh my God, I have now knocked out the requirements around DIDs and things like that. So if you look at the APIs, you look at how they relate to the requirements, you list them against each other, you will see that the test harness is actually reduces often as simple test fixtures that are, where you just where you have a simple like JavaScript file that transforms the input into a REST API call, for example. Relatively straightforward exercise.
Great. Well, thanks for explaining that.
Unless you take the cow path, then it's not straight
of course.
at all.
Then it's not straight at all. And then again, there's all kinds of things you can do, right?
About
and what?
I was gonna say it's about the journey.
It's about the journey. Yeah, it's like it's a question. If the journey forces you to walk around the world 5 times, that's maybe a hard, just to get a pizza. That might be like not
Better be a good pizza.
business outcome optimized.
Is that a euphemism for death?
No, it's just a euphemism for something that is not effective.
Okay.
Does Lambda eat pizza?
Andreas,
Beneficent.
thank you for explaining the RFP further,
Sure.
cutting off the randomness. And thank you for answering those questions. It'll be useful to circulate as we talk with other organizations and groups in the space to get some requests in the queue for this RFP work. All right. With that, we are nearing the end of our hour. Any other topics, Samrat, any India baseline show news you'd like to share as well?
Thanks, Ronald, for Yeah, pointing to me, but I don't have any updates for now. And yeah, we are always looking for new speakers on the baseline show. So yeah, I mean, yeah, the line between the two shows is really thin. So if any of you who's watching us has any recommendations, do make. Today we discussed $1 million and $1 billion idea about telecom players, and I think we should. Somebody watching this show should take us to Geo and help us talk to them about it. I will definitely get Lambda. Okay, that's it from my side.
Well, yes, thank you. And I know we've talked in the outreach group about maybe combining our shows, and we also have that grant request in the queue for a community member to become the new host and line up our guest speakers and such. So we will see what changes we make, but either way, we are excited and happy to do this every week for our viewers and just to reconnect and chat with our community members. So thank you to you all who joined the show, as well as those of you watching. And we will see you next week on the Baseline Show.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Woo!
Thank
So-
you.
We really need some music.
Cue the outro music.
Like, yeah.
Kind of.
Can we get someone want to like beatbox for us or something?
Yeah, I'm.
Oh,
Baseline.
Oh.
Was that Lambda being?